I woke up to the smell of disinfectant. Not the kind you use at home, the kind that clings to white walls and cold floors. My father's watch, the one he carried through Vietnam, was gone from my wrist. Outside the door, I saw her. Linda, my sister. Keys to my house dangling from her fingers like a prize she'd just won. That house. The place where I drank my morning coffee on the porch, staring at the trees my father planted. The place where my mother taught me to patch a roof and roast a Sunday chicken. The place I swore I'd never sell. They thought I was too old to fight back. They thought Brookfield Care Facility would be the end of me. Linda had signed papers I'd never seen, declared me incompetent, given my home, my life to herself. But I've seen worse. I've walked out of darker places. And if war taught me anything, it's this: you never underestimate the man you've locked in a cage. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when you corner someone who has nothing left to lose. Stay with me. Because if you think old men don't fight back, you've never heard my story. And if you believe justice is worth sharing, subscribe now, because some stories the world can't afford to forget. My name is Michael Harris, 62 years old, born and raised in Springfield, Illinois. Most mornings, you'd find me on the front porch of my 2-story cedar house, coffee in one hand, the morning paper in the other, watching sunlight hit the rows of maple trees my father planted before I was born. That house isn't just wood and nails. It's the smell of my mother's roast chicken on Sundays. It's the creak of the staircase I patched with my own hands after a winter storm. It's the sound of my daughter's laughter back when she still visited. I'm a Marine veteran. 2 tours overseas. I've been through nights so dark they felt like they'd swallow you whole. But nothing in combat prepared me for what came later, the kind of betrayal that doesn't come from an enemy, but from family. My younger sister Linda lives up in Chicago. She's 58, but she carries herself like the world owes her something. Always chasing the next opportunity, always just one bad investment away from ruin. We were never close, but we were all that was left after Mom and Dad passed. And for years she's been circling my house like a vulture, asking, hinting, sometimes outright demanding I sell it. I always said no, and each time I refused, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of cold calculation. I should have known. When family looks at you and sees a prize instead of a person, they're already planning the day they take what's yours. Linda's always had a way of making her problems mine. When she dropped out of college, I was the one who picked up her rent. When her 3rd marriage fell apart, I was the one who drove to Chicago at midnight to help her move out. And when her investment in a boutique hotel collapsed, guess who she called for a loan? I told myself it was what family did. We'd lost our parents young, and I was the older brother. I thought loyalty meant carrying her no matter how many times she stumbled. But over the years, her visits to Springfield became less about family and more about what she could take. She'd stand in my living room, her eyes scanning the framed photos, the antique clock from Dad's workshop, the mahogany desk I'd restored. And then she'd look out the window at the yard and say things like, "You know, Michael, you could get a lot for this place. Think about retiring somewhere smaller." It was never about me retiring. It was about her cashing out my life. 3 months ago, she brought it up again over dinner. Same smile, same fake concern. But this time, when I said no, I saw something different in her face. No disappointment, no frustration, just calculation. I didn't know it then, but that was the night she stopped asking for my house and started planning how to take it without my permission. 6 months ago, before any of this started, I had a bad feeling. Linda had been circling my house like a shark for years. But that night over dinner, the way she looked at me, it wasn't just greed. It was certainty. Like she already knew how she was going to win. I didn't know her plan. But I've been in the Marines long enough to know you don't wait for the ambush. You prepare your defense before the first shot is fired. 2 days later, I drove to downtown Springfield and walked into the law office of Thomas Green. Old school place, oak-paneled walls, brass lamps, the smell of leather-bound casebooks. Thomas had been my father's attorney, the kind of man who could write a contract that could outlive all of us. We sat in his office for 3 hours. Every document, every signature, every witness was handled by the book. When we were done, my will and property deeds were locked in his safe, and only 2 people knew what those papers said: Thomas and me. I didn't tell Linda. I didn't tell anyone. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to let the other side think you're unarmed. I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in years: control. And I promised myself if Linda ever tried to take what was mine, she'd discover just how much planning I'd already done. It happened on a Tuesday night in late February. Snow was falling hard, the kind that silences the whole street. I'd just finished dinner, pot roast and potatoes, and was carrying my plate to the sink when my foot slipped on the top stair. I didn't fall far. Just caught myself on the railing, landed hard enough to bruise my hip. Nothing broken, but it was enough for Linda to smell opportunity. An hour later, headlights cut through my living room curtains. Linda stepped out of her SUV with 2 men in white jackets. She didn't knock. She walked in like she owned the place. "Michael, this is for your own good," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. The men introduced themselves as medical transport. No ambulance, no paperwork. Just 2 strangers telling me I needed to come in for observation. I told them I was fine. They told me I didn't have a choice. Before I could reach the phone, Linda was already pocketing my house keys. I saw her glance at my father's watch on the table, the same one I wore every day, and slip it into her purse without a word. They herded me outside into the snow past the porch my father built into the back of their van. No sirens. No neighbors alerted. Just a quiet abduction in the middle of a quiet street. That was the night I left my home, and the last time I'd see it without a fight. The van ride was quiet. Too quiet. No sirens, no medical chatter. Just the hum of the heater and the sound of snow against the windows. When we pulled up, it wasn't a hospital. It was a squat brick building with a sign that read Brookfield Care Facility. Warm lights glowed from the windows, but the place felt colder than the February air. Inside, a man in a suit was waiting. Patrick Hayes, facility administrator. His handshake was too quick, his smile too practiced. "Mr. Harris, we prepared a room for you," he said, already leading me down the hall. "I'm not staying here," I told him. He ignored me. In the small room they called mine, there was a single bed, a nightstand, and a locked dresser. On the table sat a folder with my name on it. I opened it and felt my stomach turn. According to their records, I had been officially declared incapable of independent living, and there, stapled to the back, was a power of attorney document with my forged signature. My house, my accounts, my car, all now managed by Linda Thornton, my loving sister. I looked at Patrick. "Where's the doctor who signed this?" "Unavailable," he said smoothly. I knew that tone, the same tone I'd heard from officers covering up a bad mission overseas. The tone of a man who'd done this before. That's when I realized. This wasn't about my health. It was a well-rehearsed trap, and I had just walked right into it. I wasn't the only one in that hallway. As Patrick handed my folder to a nurse, a man stepped out of an office nearby. Tall, mid-40s, wearing a tailored suit. The kind of confidence that comes from holding power and using it. "Michael Harris," he said like he'd been expecting me. "Dr. Andrew Kessler, I signed your evaluation." I stared at him. "I've never met you before today." His smile didn't falter. That's not what the paperwork says. He handed Patrick a thin envelope, then looked at me again. You'll be comfortable here. Your sisters made sure of it. It hit me like a sucker punch. The doctor wasn't just part of this, he was paid to be. I'd seen deals like this in the service, two people shaking hands over someone else's misery. Later, while the nurse was distracted, I caught a glimpse of a check sticking out of Patrick's folder. Linda's signature. Pay to the order of Andrew Kessler, $5,000. Now I knew. Linda hadn't just forged documents. She'd bought a doctor to make the lie official. Patrick stood in the doorway, blocking my view. Dinner's at 6, Mr. Harris. You'll get used to the routine. I looked at both men, memorizing their faces, their voices, the way they carried themselves. In the Marines, you learn to study your enemies before you take them down. And these two had just made themselves my enemies. That night I didn't sleep. The hallway outside my room was quiet, but my mind was loud, every detail replaying like a mission briefing. Linda's forged signature. Kessler's bought evaluation. Patrick's smug smile. In the Marines, you learn two things fast. You don't win by charging head-on. You win by knowing more than your enemy thinks you do. I needed allies. And in a place like Brookfield, that meant finding the residents who weren't as broken as they seemed. The next morning, I skipped breakfast and wandered the common room. Most folks stared at the TV, lost in their own fog. But in the far corner, 3 people sat close, talking in low voices. They stopped when I got near studying me the way I was studying them. The oldest, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, spoke first. You don't look like you belong here. I smiled. Neither do you. Her name was Margaret Maggie Lowell, former journalist, still sharp as a tack. Beside her was Hank Miller, a retired mechanic with hands like steel, and across from them Samuel Price, a former lawyer who'd once sued a state senator and won. They all had the same story in different words. Family betrayal, legal tricks, property stolen. And they all had something else, the will to fight back. By the time lunch rolled around, we had an agreement. I'd dig for proof. Sam would handle the legal angles. Maggie would gather intel from staff. And Hank, well, Hank had a few ideas about getting into locked rooms. For the first time since Linda took my keys, I felt at control. We started small. Sam told me the first rule of building a case: don't tip your hand before you've got the hammer ready. So I played my part, just another old man shuffling between the dining hall and my room. But my eyes were open and my ears were working overtime. Maggie had a way of making people talk. By the end of the first week, she'd accidentally overheard Patrick on the phone with someone named Janet about a transfer package for a new resident. That sounded exactly like the kind of deal they'd pulled on me. Hank took the night shift. With a paperclip and a steady hand, he could open half the doors in Brookfield. One night, he brought back a stack of manila folders from the admin office, medical files, property deeds, and bank statements for at least a dozen residents. It was worse than we thought. Every file told the same story: sudden medical evaluations, power of attorney transfers, and quick sales of lifelong homes. Most of these people didn't even know their names were on sale contracts. Sam's eyes lit up as he flipped through the paperwork. This isn't just fraud, Michael. This is organized exploitation. Multiple counts, multiple victims. I tucked my own file under my arm. Linda's forged signature was right there in black and white next to Kessler's certification. It made my blood boil. But it also made me smile, because now, for the first time, I had something I could hit them with. And once I did, they'd never see it coming. It was past 10 p.m. when I left my room for a glass of water. The night shift barely looked up from their phones as I shuffled by, cane tapping softly on the linoleum. Halfway to the kitchen, I heard voices. low, deliberate, coming from Patrick's office. I stopped just outside the door. The blinds were closed, but the door was cracked an inch, enough to hear everything. "Janet the Harris property closes next week," Patrick said. "Linda's already signed the expedited sale agreement. We'll wire her the proceeds minus our cut." My chest tightened. Janet's voice came through the speakerphone, smug and sharp. "And Kessler's evaluation bulletproof." Patrick laughed quietly. "He's done a dozen of these for us. Never had one overturned. $5,000 well spent." I slipped my phone from my pocket. Muscle memory from years in the Marine's thumb found the record button without looking. Patrick continued. "After this, we move on the Lowell estate. Maggie won't last long once her nephew gets the POA paperwork." That made my grip tighten. They weren't just coming for me, they were coming for her. Janet replied, "Same process exactly. Quick sale cash out, no questions." The call ended. Patrick sat back in his chair, humming, oblivious to the fact that he'd just handed me the final piece I needed. I slipped away, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the certainty that the tide had just turned. By morning, the recording was copied to 3 different places, my phone a flash drive Hank had stashed in his toolbox in Sam's locked desk drawer. If they tried to take one, the others would still be there. We met in the far corner of the common room, voices low, eyes always scanning for staff. I played the recording for Maggie first. Her jaw tightened when Patrick mentioned her nephew. "That's our kill shot," Sam said. "Combine this with the forged documents and the property files Hank found, and we've got enough for criminal charges." I shook my head. "Not yet. We move too early, they'll bury the evidence. We wait until Linda closes the sale, let them commit all the way, then we drop it." Sam leaned back, thinking it over. "It's risky, but if we catch them in the act, they can't wriggle out." Hank grinned, tapping his fingers like a mechanic hearing an engine purr. "I can get us into the admin office one more time. Grab anything with their signatures and timestamps." Maggie added, "And I'll work the floor, keep the staff distracted during your run." It felt like planning an op back in the Corps, each of us with a role each moved time to the second. I looked at all 3 of them. This isn't just about me anymore. We take them down. We save everyone in here. For the first time since Linda betrayed me, I saw something in my friend's eyes. Not just determination, hope. 2 nights later, we moved. The plan was simple. Hank and I would get into Patrick's office. Sam would watch the hallway and Maggie would keep the night nurse busy with the fall in the laundry room. At exactly 9:45 p.m., I tapped my cane twice outside Hank's room, the signal. He slipped out, carrying his old leather satchel, the one that rattled faintly with tools. The admin wing was dark, except for a sliver of light under Patrick's door. Hank crouched, worked the lock like it was nothing, and we were in. The smell of stale coffee and paper hung in the air. Hank headed straight for the file cabinet, whispering, "Watch the door." I stood just inside, listening for footsteps. The building seemed quieter than usual, too quiet. Hank pulled folder after folder, bank transfers, POA forms, contracts. All with the same pattern, bogus evaluations, sudden property sales, fat checks cut to consultants. And Linda's name was in more than just my file. She'd been in on at least 3 other deals. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just betrayal. It was her career. Hank slipped the last file into his satchel. That's when I heard it, the click of shoes on linoleum coming fast. "Time to go," I hissed. We slipped out, hugging the wall just as Patrick's shadow filled the far end of the hall. I didn't look back. By the time he reached his office, we were ghosts in the dark. By morning, every file we'd taken was copied, scanned, and stored in 3 different places. Sam drafted a clean, airtight summary, dates, names, signatures, amounts. When I looked at the stack, it didn't feel like paper. It felt like ammunition. We agreed to move on Friday, the day Linda's sale on my house was set to close. We'd hit them with everything all at once where they couldn't wriggle away in front of the county fraud division. At 8:30 a.m., Hank wheeled me out the front door like just another old man heading to a medical appointment. Maggie walked beside us carrying a tote bag that held every shred of evidence. Sam followed in his sedan, his old lawyer's briefcase riding shotgun. The fraud division was housed in a squat gray building downtown. No marble columns, no grandeur, just the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and the kind of people who see through lies for a living. We sat across from investigator Rachel Torres, a woman who looked like she'd eaten liars for breakfast. I slid the flash drive across the desk. Sam handled the talking, his voice steady professional. When Torres hit play on the Patrick Janet call, her eyebrows rose. By the end, she was leaning back in her chair, arms crossed. "You've been sitting on a gold mine," she said. "This isn't just a case. This is a takedown." For the first time, I let myself smile. Because I knew in a matter of hours Brookfield's walls wouldn't be a prison anymore. They'd be a crime scene. It didn't take long. By noon, Investigator Torres and 2 county deputies were walking through Brookfield's front doors. I stayed in Sam's car across the street watching. This wasn't my moment to speak, it was my moment to watch justice roll in. Through the glass, I saw Patrick freeze mid-sentence as Torres flashed her badge. A deputy took his arm, guiding him toward the exit. No shouting, no fight, just the quiet collapse of a man who knew the game was over. Minutes later, they brought Linda out. She was in her public smile, the one she used for church picnics and real estate closings. It didn't last. Torres handed her the warrant, and the color drained from her face. I could almost hear her thoughts, how she'd spin it, who she'd blame, how quickly she'd call a lawyer. But when they read the list of charges, fraud, elder exploitation, conspiracy, even, she couldn't pretend it was a misunderstanding. Maggie, Hank, and a few other residents had gathered by the window. When the deputies loaded Linda into the back of the cruiser, Maggie's hand found mine. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head. "We did it." As the cruisers pulled away, Sam looked over from the driver's seat. "Ready to go home, Michael." I watched the facility shrink in the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. "Yeah," I said, "let's go home." The day I walked out of Brookfield Care Facility, the air felt different. Fresher, lighter, like the world had been waiting for me to return. Sam pulled up to my house and cut the engine. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the front porch Dorothy and I had built together 40 years ago. When I unlocked the door, the smell of cedar floors and old books wrapped around me like a blanket. My toolbox was back in its corner, the photo of Dorothy smiling from the mantel, and sunlight spilled across the dining table where so many meals and memories had been made. Hank, Maggie, and Sam joined me that evening for dinner. We didn't talk much about Linda or Patrick. We talked about the future, about Thursday night dinners, about helping other residents still trapped in places like Brookfield. I realized then revenge hadn't just given me my house back. It had given me purpose. For anyone listening, let my story be a reminder, no matter your age, your strength, or your circumstances, you can fight back. And when you do, you might find more than justice. You might find a new family. If you've stayed with me this far, share this story. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep shining light on the shadows where people like Patrick and Linda hide. Because somewhere out there another fight is waiting and you might just be the one to win it. A month after the arrests, the courtroom handed down its final word. Linda and Patrick were each sentenced to over 10 years for fraud, elder exploitation, and conspiracy. The judge's gavel fell like a final nail sealing a coffin they'd built for themselves. News of the case spread fast. Brookfield Care Facility came under state investigation, and within weeks, 47 families were reunited with loved ones they thought they'd lost. Some cried, some raged. All of them understood exactly what had been stolen and what had been returned. For me, life settled into a rhythm. Every Thursday night, Hank, Maggie, Sam, and I gathered around my dining table. We called it Survivor's Supper. It wasn't just dinner, it was a war council for people who'd survived battles no one saw coming. We started helping others, connecting them with lawyers, investigators, and resources to fight their own wars. I kept one photo on my desk, not of Linda, not of Patrick, but of the four of us standing in my kitchen the night I came home. To me, that's family. And if you're listening, I want you to remember something: blood doesn't always define family. Sometimes family is forged in fire in the fights you never thought you'd have to win. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe, not for me, but for the people still out there trapped, waiting for someone to believe them. Because the fight against people like Linda and Patrick isn't over. And maybe one day it'll be your victory story we tell here.